All right. Next up is your rhombus. It has all the characteristics of a parallelogram. Yes, because it falls under the parallelogram family. But what do you know about all four sides of a rhombus? They are all equal to each other. So all four sides are congruent. And that is one of the two big things that we get out of a rhombus. Now, opposite angles are congruent just like before because of parallelograms, but there's something special about your diagonals. Yes. The diagonals are always perpendicular. You still get a same midpoint. You still get them to bisect each other. Because those are what happens with parallelograms. Because they have all the stuff with parallelograms. But the diagonals are perpendicular. Are the diagonals congruent to each other? No. They're not necessarily. I butchered that, sorry. So I'll put spelling. They're not necessarily congruent, but they are perpendicular. And when you get to a rhombus, you make sure that you have all four sides that are congruent. And yeah, that side's gonna... You're going to cut up the diagonals just like that. But you also get those two sides are parallel, those two sides are parallel. That angle's congruent to this angle, that angle's congruent to this angle. You get everything from a parallelogram. Every single thing from a parallelogram. Except for the biggest thing is all four sides are congruent and the diagonals are perpendicular to each other. So, do we understand that difference? Kinda, sorta? Do you think you have to know? Yes. If I gave you an assessment and I gave you some characteristics of a shape, you better be able to tell me what that shape is. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Now, my favorite of all, the square. I will tell you this right off the bat. The square is a regular quadrilateral. So what does it mean to be regular quadrilateral? What can we say about all sides? Okay, they're all equal, but in geometry terms we say they're congruent, right? Yeah. And what do we know about all interior angles? They're congruent. And what do we know about all exterior angles? They're congruent as well. Because if you have an angle here, the exterior angle is going to be the same for here as it is for here, as it is for here, as it is for here. Now, what's the angle of a square? $90 degrees. So I'm going to get this. What shape has four sides like this? So it's like a rhombus because all four sides are congruent. And diagonals are perpendicular. So the diagonals are perpendicular. But it is like a rectangle. Because the two diagonals this is for a square. The diagonals are all congruent. So all of these sides are the same. And it has all characteristics of a parallelogram. Because remember, you got your parallelogram, you got your rectangle, you got your rhombus, and together, these two shapes form the square. Because the square has everything the rectangle has, and the square has everything the rhombus has. The way that I remember it is if a rectangle and a rhombus got married, fell in love, had a kid, that kid's going to be a square. The kid might not be that popular because the kid's a square, but the square has everything a parallelogram has, a rectangle, and a rhombus. So if you want to start memorizing what's going on here, start with the parallelogram. Understand what goes on with the parallelogram, then understand what a rectangle does. All a rectangle does is it takes a parallelogram, and instead of having two sides that are diagonal, they make them vertical. So you have vertical and horizontal sides. Slopes of 0, if it's just drawn like that, slopes of 0 and undefined. The rhombus is just four sides are congruent. And it's like a square if you squished it in a little bit. But the special thing about a rhombus is not only are those four sides the same, but the diagonals are perpendicular. The square has the perpendicular diagonals, all four sides that are congruent from the rhombus, but also that the diagonals are congruent from the rectangle. So it has all of those different fun shapes for you. So there you go. Tomorrow we're going to talk about isosceles trapezoids. We're going to talk about trapezoids. We're going to talk about kites. And that's going to wrap up the different types of quadrilaterals. And then you are going to start proving the heck out of so many different things based off these characteristics. We have basically about a week when we get back of really delving deep into quadrilaterals, and then we're going to be moving on. So you really, really need to know what's going on with the different types of the different characteristics of these quadrilaterals. All right? Good to go? Awesome.